All right, so we're going to talk about stat weights. Stats and stat weights for now. I don't really believe, I understand the whole thing about stat weights. My only thing about stat weights is I like to know. So I'm an engineer in real life. Let me give you a little backstory about this. I'm an engineer. I do software engineering, and I'm working on a master's right now, and I'm into a lot of the classes where you apply a lot of discrete math topics. So if any of you guys are in engineering of some kind, and you take a class called linear algebra. Linear algebra is discrete math 101. And discrete math, you talk about kind of really large data sets. You start to learn how to think about data sets is really what linear algebra kind of lets you think about. So as you go in, there are higher and higher terms, levels of what you would call algebra. And when you get to grad school, there is some stuff called machine learning that's a big deal. Machine learning works on a concept called the law of very large numbers, very large data sets. And what it means is as you get enough data sets, you can kind of just generate patterns and stuff like that are roughly accurate and you can rely on them. Now, what these... Trying to figure out how to tie this in. Where I'm trying to go with this is you have... when you have your stat weights, this is where I was going with. Yeah, I'm gonna talk nerd for a little bit. So when you have your stat weights, you're gonna have some numbers that are gonna look like. So you're gonna have mastery, and you're gonna have like 15.5, and then you're gonna have crit, and it's gonna be like 13.2, and then you're gonna have haste, and it's gonna be 13.1, and then you're gonna have int, which is 10.8. And then spell power, which is 10.7, and versatility is like 0.1 or whatever it is, right? What does this mean? Is kind of the where I'm going with this. What does this mean? Does it mean that crit is better than haste for you? Well, kind of. It means they're about the same, really. Like, if you look at this and you look in terms of what percent error is, right? These two numbers are pretty close. They're a lot further from... They're closer to this than this, which means they are clearly better than these. But they're still a distance away, right? So you can kind of, from these numbers, you can say, okay, haste and mastery, or haste and crit are worse than mastery, right? But you can't really... The problem is you can't really say by how much, because, okay, so you get you plug these in, and Pawn gives you a string, and it says this item is a 5% upgrade for this slot. Not really, because then you lose... That stat weight doesn't take into account what your new stats are going to be after you lose that stuff, right? So there's a lot of shit that you don't get with these stat weights. And that's why I don't really believe in using these for like a definitive, this is a 10% upgrade for me, right? I don't believe in that. I don't know what spiked is. You're gonna have to use more. I literally, so like, I don't even pay attention to trinkets. I'm like the worst theory crafter in that I hate using stuff like that. I don't know. This is exactly QWE. Your name is awful. That's kind of the stuff that I'm talking about too. Is you get shit like that, and you're like, what in the actual fuck is going on? Like, it makes sense with the whole... There was, like, forever people were trying to figure out, well, why is crit rated so high? It's like, well, you've got perdition relics. And people didn't quite realize that. But then you get stuff like exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, well, I've got, like, 90% mastery, 24% haste, and now it's being like, well, haste and mastery are still kind of equal to you. And you have no idea why. And a lot of that kind of comes down to the fact that... what I was talking about earlier, where as you're gearing up, you're gonna have a shit ton more intellect, and your secondary stats are pretty much locked as far as how much you're gonna have. A little bit more secondary stats by the end of by the end of the expansion, we might see like 5% more haste and crit, and maybe 10% more mastery on all of our gear, like total, right? And then we're also gonna have like 8% versatility because they're fucking retarded with that, giving us that. But because of that, and because math, I'm going to use that as an abbreviation. I could, if you want, I'll go into this at some other point. But for now, take it as because math, what's going to happen is by 7.2, we're going to have these numbers, but these are going to be like 18, right? Oh, fuck me. Right? That's going to be 18, and this is going to be 19, or 18.1, and then this is going to be like 19.0, right? But the problem is these are relative. What happens with these stat weights is these are relative to these. Is what the way Simcraft works is it sets these relative to these, right? This is actually still relative to int. Everything is relative to your base primary stat. And as you get more of that primary stat, everything else inflates in value because that primary stat is just a static. It is a static, like on a y equals mx plus b, that is your m, right? What these are is you got y equals, what is it? ax squared plus bx plus c, right? When you just have this is y equals mx plus b. When you have this is your y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And then that's where you start to get like this shit's going on. And there's a bunch of other variables that go on. So as this number increases, or as your intellect increases, these are going to drastically increase in value, because when you're going from, imagine this, if you're at 35,000 intel right now, respectable for like 875, 880 item level. When you go from that to 50,000 intel, that's about a, what is that? That's about a 30, quadratics or nothing. That's about like a 40% increase, 30-40% increase when you go from there to there. And then when you go from, when you do that, your mastery is now going from being a 100% damage increase on this 35k to a 100% increase on this 50k. So each point of mastery now increases by a lot. Your crit, you're now doubling 50,000 int instead of 35,000 int. So a percent of crit, or a point in crit, is much more valuable at 50,000 int than 35,000 int. So what's going to happen is by the end of Nighthold, we're going to see these stat weights go, like, everything is going to be like, intel is literally worse than versatility. And everyone's going to be like, whoa, versatility is good. It's like, well, no, it's still shit. But that's because we centered all these graphs around intel instead of, like, just a number. If that makes sense. So, because of the way the item budget works, what it really comes down to is because of the way the item budget works, there is a fuck ton more that is put into your base stat as the item level increases. Then there is secondary stats, because they don't want us to have like 50% crit, haste, and then 200% mastery, right? Like, that's bad.